What exactly does it mean to be a dreamer, and more, today on Carpe Diem. Hello and welcome to Carpe Diem. I'm Gregory Miller, and today we're going to talk about the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, also known as DACA. Joining me later is a dreamer from Montclair State. But first, we want to make sure that you are all informed about the basics of the law and what a dreamer is. We asked some of our classmates to help us explain. Let's find out.
DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals.
It is a federal program that was created under President Obama in 2012.
It states that people brought to the United States illegally can temporarily work and study in America.
There are currently over 700,000 young adults protected under DACA.
In order to be eligible, applicants had to arrive into the U.S. before they were 16.
And have been living here since June 15, 2007.
If they were older than 30 in 2012, then they are not eligible.
Mexico is the biggest country of origin, but anyone from around the globe can be protected under it.
With DACA, those who applied and got accepted can get a driver's license, go to university, and hold legal jobs.
Those who have been convicted of a felony or pose a threat to national security are not eligible to apply.
They must be in school, have graduated from a university or obtained a GED, or have been honorably discharged from the U.S. Coast Guard or U.S. Armed Forces.
This law, however, is not perfect. There is no path to citizenship.
They just have 2 years to stay in the U.S. legally, and after that, they can renew their membership.
Some DACA recipients can get a green card, but it is not guaranteed.
As of September, President Trump is no longer accepting applicants.
Over 30,000 people a month are losing their permits and are in danger of deportation.
Those who have permits are safe until they expire.
And those protected under DACA are known as dreamers.
Now that we are all a little more informed about DACA, there have been some recent developments regarding this program. Just a few days ago, a federal judge ruled that the Trump administration has to start accepting applications again. I'm joined by Nicole Romero, a Montclair student who is a dreamer herself. The judge is giving the administration 90 days to change his mind, and if not, they will start accepting applications again. And before we dive deeper into the political side, Nicole, I want to ask you a few questions about your life and how you got here today. So, when did your family move to the United States?
So I moved here when I was 2 years old, actually. So I've been here all of my life.
And where did your family move from?
We came from Peru. We came here when I was 2, and it was really a way to just, start a life here because there were no jobs over there.
Right. And did you initially know that you, when did you find out that you were undocumented?
I became aware of it when I was 13, but I didn't really understand it until I was 16. When I was 16 and I was in high school, that's when a lot of my friends were, studying for their driving permits, and they were starting their new jobs and getting work permits. And then I remember going home, and it became really evident to me that I didn't have paperwork to present, and that's when it really made me understand, like, I was different, and it made me stand out.
So, when you found out, did you have a conversation with your parents, and how did that go?
I did have a conversation with them. It was more of them explaining what it really was, and it was like, you don't have a social, so therefore you can't get a driver's license. You might not even be able to go to college after high school. And it really made me realize that my life was in a limbo. I didn't know where I was going to go after high school.
Okay, great. Well, not great, but so you found out all of this. How did you sort of come to terms with it?
So like I said, I found out when I was 16. And luckily for me, in 2012, that's when it was passed. I was 16 years old. I was a junior in high school, and President Barack Obama had put this into place. So almost immediately I applied for it, and it only took me a couple months to get my work authorization. So I didn't really have to go through that much of the stress that a lot of undocumented teenagers went through. Okay,
so you would say that your sort of path to becoming a part of the DACA program wasn't as bad as some other people?
Correct.
All right. So how long was it exactly to become a part of the program?
I think it took me 6 months to receive my my work authorization in the mail.
Okay. And So 6 months is a short amount of time in comparison to some other people.
Right. I've heard cases where people don't get it for like more than like a year sometimes. It just that the whole accepting process for USCIS is very long and tedious, and they don't really keep you updated.
Yeah, I can imagine. So then, what made you sort of decide to open up about your immigration status?
So, growing up, this was something that I was taught to keep under wraps. It was nothing that I, openly shared to people, and it wasn't like a secret that you just told your friends. It was something that I carried as being ashamed. Like, I grew up being ashamed of it. So I did come into contact with a lot of immigration reform websites that kept me updated on it. America's Voice, for example, I was subscribed to their newsletter. So they would send out emails saying that, let's take action, all this stuff. But I was scared because I felt like I'm just one person. What change could I possibly make? But then in September, when the Trump administration terminated the program, it was almost like I felt like it was my calling. Like I had to do something because my life was in jeopardy here. Like how could I just be a bystander?
Right, right. And obviously this topic is pretty polarizing. How do you sort of explain your situation to people who might not really understand or agree with you?
That's very difficult. It's hard because I feel like when President Trump became president, a lot of people kind of openly were against this. And so people already have a judgment on it. But when I sit down and talk to people, people kind of assume that I was born here and that I'm a citizen and I don't struggle with this stuff. And then when I come out and say, no, actually, I'm undocumented, I'm a DACA recipient, and this is something that I struggle with, I feel like when they see this face of a person who's going to school and works hard just as any other citizen here, it's like, it feels like it's inhumane, and they wanna sympathize, they wanna support me.
It sort of opens up their minds a
exactly,
little bit more.
Yes, yeah.
Right. And how has being part of the program sort of impacted your life? What have been the benefits, and what have been maybe if there were any drawbacks at all?
The benefits, I would say, absolutely being able to go to college, being able to work, and being able to drive. Before that, like I said, after high school, I thought I wasn't going to do anything. I didn't know what was going to become of my life. But because of the program, it allowed me to have a social, and then I could apply to school and be here at Montclair State with you and with everyone else, yeah.
And what exactly do you do at Montclair State? What's your major?
I'm a film major. I'm a junior actually right now.
Okay, great. And how have you utilized your major of filmmaking to raise awareness about the program?
Yeah, actually, I did a documentary. It's called DACAmented. It actually just won first place in the Passaic County Film Festival.
Oh, great. Congratulations.
Thank you. We actually held this event back in December to raise awareness of DACA, where we just gathered enough people to really come out, hang out, talk about what's going on about the issue, and make some calls to our state representatives, urging them to support it. So because of that, we did a whole documentary on the planning, the actual execution of it, the event, and that's really how I've been using my filmmaking aspect to help me in this, because I feel like a lot of people either have their voice or they just have their talent, to be able to utilize it.
Right, exactly. And you said that you made calls to your representatives. How did the calls go?
So the format of our event was really, I got up there, I shared my story, and I really talked about why we were doing it, which was to have people call, because I feel like our state representatives need to hear a large group of people calling and telling them, hey, this is important, this matters to me. Like, I am a citizen, I'm a voting citizen, and a lot of people who attended the event were voting citizens, are voting citizens. So hearing their voices, it's like, this matters to us, please support it. So, we put a phone number up on the board, and everyone was calling and, freely saying what they wanted. We had a script up there if people got stuck, but for the most part, it was just people saying what they needed to say.
And how many people attended the event?
I'd say over 30 people.
Over 30 people?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And do you think that putting that event on sort of helped?
I do. I do, because before that Saturday, maybe that office wouldn't have received that many calls, and it just felt like it was what Patterson was doing in their efforts to protect DACA.
Okay, cool. Another question for you is, so has your family also been impacted? Do you know anyone else that has been impacted by this or is a part of the DACA program?
I have a lot of friends who I know have been impacted by it. Once the program was terminated, everyone has been really anxious and scared
Right.
of what's going to happen to them. My family, not so much. I'm the only DACA recipient in my family. But, you know, I think my family and my friends seeing how much anxiety that created for me
Right.
back in September was enough to know, like, this was not a good thing.
Right, right. And what else have you been doing to sort of help with this cause?
So to help with the cause, I've been trying to get involved with organizations like Make the Road New Jersey, who really emphasize this. And recently, New Jersey actually just passed a law that DACA recipients can apply for financial aid. So I'm trying to get really involved in that and make my voice heard as much as I could.
Okay. And I heard that you also went down to DC for the protests. Can you sort of explain what that was like?
So back in January, when I went to DC for the protest, it was an unsure thing. It was kind of an overnight decision that I decided. I had seen United We Dream, they're an immigration organization. They were all going down there, and it was a lot of people from different states in the country. And I felt like, yes, I made this event in Paterson, but what more can I do? I want to be surrounded with people who are also affected by this directly, like myself. And so I went. The atmosphere was insane. It was so much love and acceptance, and people just protecting each other and voicing their voices.
Okay, well, we actually have some footage from you when you were in DC for the protests, so let's take a look. That was some great footage. We now have Stephen Ruszczyk, who's an Assistant Professor of Sociology here at Montclair State University. Welcome, Stephen, and thank you for joining us. So before we get to you, Stephen, Nicole, we saw some of the footage there. How did that sort of impact you? Like, what did you gain from that experience?
Support and knowing that I'm not alone. Yeah, I think that was something that I really, really learned. I think one of the most valuable things I learned from that trip is that we're all brothers and sisters. And our job, our duty is to protect and love one another.
That's really cool. So Stephen, for you, what got you interested in the DACA program?
It stems from, I think, my experience as a school teacher in New York City, where I was a teacher for 7 years, and being part of school communities where you get to learn students' lives in deep ways led me to do more things with my students. Like, I became a soccer coach, and little by little, students who are in your class every day start to tell you things about their lives that maybe you didn't know from just the classroom. And one of those, of course, is that many of my students were undocumented. And so in 2008, when I began my graduate studies, I began studying many of my former students and following their lives. So from 2008 until today, I've been following a group of young people's lives in New York. And of course, over that period, when I began that study, DACA did not exist. And then DACA, of course, appears in 2012. And then now, of course, it's, it was rescinded, and then now it's in sort of a liminal position. But it's really by spending so much time with people whose lives are affected by this problem.
And was there any one particular person that sort of stood out to you?
Yes. One student who I call Ernie as a pseudonym is someone who I first met in my English class in 2005. And he became a member of the soccer team, and we became close, and we would talk about his future dreams and plans. And you know, he had dreams just like every other one of my students, right? Which involved going to college and being able to gain a career, I think, in one of his interests. And it was you know, emotional for me, but even, of course, more so for him to realize all the obstacles that were in his path to make that dream good. And so despite graduating from high school on time with his classmates, his life really took a different path at that point. Rather than attending college, which would have been difficult without access to financial aid, he went and began working in a candle factory, and took on a life of adulthood really much earlier than his classmates, right? Where he had adult responsibilities, he contributed to the rent, he, you know, had a long-term romantic partner, right? All those things that come with adulthood, he was doing well before his classmates were. And when DACA starts, he applied for DACA and was accepted, and was able to use that to work in what we call the formal economy. But after a time, he realized that he didn't feel that he was gaining all of the benefits that that college students, for example, can gain from DACA, because his job prospects were limited by the fact that he only had a high school diploma. And so he didn't reapply for DACA when the time came up. And now that you know, the immigration situation in the United States has become much more fraught, you know, he's full of fear and stress and things like that. And a final point is, he's of course not just an individual, right? He has a family, which is a mixed status family, which is a sort of very common situation in the United States. Mixed status means that some people in your family have legal status and some don't. And so he has younger brothers who have legal status. He also has a son today who has legal status. And so you can imagine the implications of deportation for someone who is such deep social ties to you know, to his community, to his family, and to the United States. You know, really changes what it means to be deportable.
Right. And for Nicole, going off of Stephen knowing certain people that sort of were impactful to him, was there anyone at the DC protests that sort of impacted you in any sort of way?
Everyone there, absolutely. It's one thing when you know your story and you live your story.
Right. Then
you go to a place and you meet a whole bunch of different people whose struggles don't look like your own, but they're completely, you just feel hopeless and you want to help them somehow, but you can't even help yourself.
Well, thank you. And for Stephen, so let's sort of talk about the legal side of DACA. So sort of Nicole was touching upon this earlier, but how hard is it to become a part of the program? What are the steps necessary? Right,
and that's a really important question, because even though DACA is sort of an opportunity for many of the people who I was working with in my study were unable to take advantage of it. So in addition to needing to be here before 2007, being, you know, under the age of 30 and those kind of requirements, you also couldn't have ever had any contact with you know, Customs and Border Patrol. So some of the youth who I work with had crossed the border, had gotten returned to Mexico, and then entered a second time. And because of that, you know, which happened, of course, years and years ago, they are unable to apply, right, as they would remain deportable. So for students like that, they have faced, I think, you know, a different pathway than the more hopeful pathway that we've seen for DACA. In addition, there was one young man in my study who, he was never a member of a gang, but he had sort of been in a crew and, you know, was around people, and he was worried that he maybe ended up on one of these gang registry lists, right, despite never being a full member. And because of that, he was reluctant to apply for it as well. So while it has had very positive impact on the lives of those who receive it, there's also an important segment who have not been able to even apply for the benefits as well.
And once in the program, obviously there is no path to citizenship, but it was mentioned that some people can get green cards. How tough is it to obtain that? Stephen?
So DACA gives you no access to gaining a green card directly whatsoever. However, the process of the application process, in which many people had contact with lawyers for the first time, led some exceptional cases of people to realize that they qualified for one or two sort of small loopholes. Okay. Exceptional status is where you were abandoned by your family, right? Special immigrant juvenile status, or you were a victim of a crime where you can apply for a U visa. And for people who are able to get on those tracks, it creates a totally different set of life chances, really, right? One young woman in my study was, to sort of make a long story short, was moved out from her parents, was told to move out from her family, and was able to apply for this SIJS status, and was able to gain a green card. And with her college degree, she was able to have a job that contributes so much to the community, to the city, and to the country, really. You know, earning more than I was earning at the time, right out of college. And so I think one of the important stories about DACA to emphasize is these young people have so much talent, right, and so much promise in their lives. And by creating pathways of like DACA, or even better, like the DREAM Act, to give people a path to citizenship, it's creating sort of clear benefits for them, but also very clearly for the country at large.
And you mentioned to me earlier about the article that you wrote. Could you explain a little bit more in detail about the article that you wrote and how it became the most cited, I believe, on Google Books?
Right. So along with Professor Roberto Gonzalez from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and Veronica Terriquez, who was at that time from the University of Southern California, we wrote an article that sketched out sort of the early benefits of DACA, and it was the first study that looked at DACA recipients across the country. You can imagine that it's very difficult to do research with undocumented and documented youth, as it's a stigmatized status, and so it was kind of a breakthrough study in terms of that regard. And what we found was two stories. One is that there were clear benefits, and that it was allowing people who had previously their sort of life chances had been suppressed because of their exclusion, that they were making good on the new access that they had through DACA. 59% of the over 2,000 respondents were able to gain new jobs. About half were able to earn more money, but also things like gaining internships for the first time, right, which are an important sort of step towards gaining a career, as well as the clear benefit of gaining a driver's license, which most people did. And usually we think about driver's licenses for things like getting to work or getting to school, which are clearly important. But to give you a sense of how deeply unauthorized status impacts your life, it also changes the way people can date, right? The way they can play those roles as young people of having someone pick you up, right, at your house and going out and coming back home, versus being excluded from that kind of ritual in the coming of age, and one that's particularly important here in New Jersey, right, where it's hard to depend only on public transportation. And so that's one side of it, is that there's clear clear benefits to people who applied to DACA. We also saw, though, that those who are DACA recipients, that they're a diverse population. They're not just one sort of from one country, and they don't just have one kind of background. And we saw that those whose parents had some kind of college education, or those who were tied to immigrant organizations such as Make the Road New Jersey or Wind of the Spirit here in New Jersey, that they were able to better access some of the benefits, in particular things like getting a new job and getting an internship. So So yeah, so there's benefits to being particularly involved in organizations.
All right, so this issue is really increasingly polarizing. So this is for both of you. What do you see as the future of DACA? And we'll start with you, Nicole, on a personal level.
Because the program is so flawed, right now they're only accepting DACA renewal applications, but that doesn't mean like if you haven't applied for it before, you can't apply for it now. And so that issue is, it's very excluding. Like, it excludes a lot of people, and there's 800,000 undocumented people in this country. There's 22,000 DACA recipients in New Jersey. There's still a lot of people under the shadows living, you know? And so I think a pathway to citizenship, for sure, would be, personally, for me, that's what I want. I want to be a citizen. I feel like I'm a citizen. This is my country. And it's like a paperwork that's telling me I'm not, you know?
And Stephen?
It's a great and important question, right? Despite DACA being rescinded, we know that there has been resistance already, right? And we had a third judge this week who said that the Trump administration cannot just end the program the way it is. And I think that that's just one example of ways in which this is a highly contested issue. And it's one that probably will remain contested in terms of how it works through power. But it's important to juxtapose that contestation with popular opinion, which is over in the latest poll that I saw, 86% of Americans agree that there should be some pathway to citizenship for these young people. So it's not a contested issue for Americans, it's a contested political issue.
Right.
And I think that what has been able to move this issue so much is the really inspirational participation of young dreamers who are legally not citizens, but they're acting in ways that are more aligned with the way that we would like our citizens to be, right? To be very involved in the political system, right? Nicole being involved in protests and things like that are particularly courageous, right? Given their background. So my sense is at a certain point, we don't know when the time will come, that law will pass.
Well, thank you both, Nicole and Stephen, for being here. We really appreciate it. If you would like more information about this or any other edition of Carpe Diem, you can write to us at the email address on your screen, carpediem@mail.montclair.edu, or call us at 973-655-5158. I'm Gregory Miller. Thanks for watching.